The Steamboat Arabia, A Journey Through Time. Chapter 1. The Age of Steamboat. In the mid-19th century, America was a nation on the move. The Industrial Revolution had brought about significant advancements, and one of the most transformative was the steamboat. These powerful vessels plied the rivers of the United States, turning waterways into highways, connecting distant cities, and fostering the rapid expansion of the American frontier. Among the many steamboats that crisscrossed the mighty rivers of the Midwest, the Steamboat Arabia held a special place. Built in 1853 in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, the Arabia was an impressive vessel for its time. Measuring 171 feet long, 29 feet wide, and with a draft of just 5 feet, it was designed to navigate the often shallow and treacherous rivers of the Midwest. The Arabia was a side-wheeler, powered by steam engines that turned massive paddle wheels on either side of the boat, propelling it upstream against strong currents. It could carry up to 222 tons of cargo and passengers, making it a vital link between the bustling city of St. Louis and the frontier towns of the Missouri River. For 3 years, the Arabia carried settlers, goods, and supplies deep into the heart of the American wilderness. It became a familiar sight along the river, known for its reliability and speed. But like all steamboats of the era, the Arabia faced constant danger. The rivers were full of hidden obstacles, snags, sandbars, and floating debris that could rip through the wooden hull of a boat and send it to the bottom in minutes. Despite the perils, the Arabia continued its work, ferrying pioneers and their dreams into the unknown. Chapter 2. The Final Voyage. On the morning of September 5, 1856, the Arabia departed from St. Louis on what was to be its final voyage. The boat was loaded with 200 tons of cargo, including tools, supplies, and luxury goods bound for the frontier towns of the Missouri River. Among the passengers were several families seeking a new life in the West. The mood on board was optimistic, as the boat's crew expertly navigated the twisting, unpredictable river. As the Arabia made its way upriver, the landscape began to change. The riverbanks, once dotted with towns and farms, gave way to dense forests and untamed wilderness. The waterway became narrower, and the current stronger. The experienced crew was well aware of the dangers, but they had navigated these waters many times before and were confident in their ability to avoid disaster. In the early afternoon of September 5th, the Arabia was approaching a bend in the river near Parkville, Missouri, when disaster struck. Unbeknownst to the crew, a large cottonwood tree had recently fallen into the river. The tree, submerged just below the surface, had become a deadly snag, a hazard that was invisible until it was too late. The Arabia struck the snag with tremendous force. The tree's branches tore through the hull, causing the boat to take on water rapidly. The crew and passengers scrambled to save themselves as the steamboat began to sink. Within minutes, the Arabia was lost, disappearing beneath the muddy waters of the Missouri River. Miraculously, all the passengers and crew survived, but the cargo and the boat itself were gone, buried under the river's shifting sands. Chapter 3. The Lost Treasure. For over a century, the Arabia lay forgotten, entombed in a watery grave. The Missouri River, known for its shifting course, eventually moved away from the site of the wreck, leaving the steamboat buried deep beneath the Kansas cornfield. Over time, the story of the Arabia became a legend, a tale of lost treasure whispered among locals but largely dismissed as folklore. In the 1980s, a group of amateur treasure hunters led by Bob Hawley became intrigued by the legend of the Arabia. They believed that the steamboat might still be buried somewhere near the Missouri River, and they were determined to find it. Armed with metal detectors and a deep sense of curiosity, the group began searching for clues to the boat's location. After extensive research and several false starts, the team finally pinpointed the likely location of the Arabia. In the summer of 1988, they began digging in a field near the small town of Parkville, Missouri. The work was difficult, as they had to dig through 45 feet of mud and waterlogged earth to reach the wreck. But their persistence paid off when they uncovered the first timbers of the Arabia's hull. The excavation of the Arabia was a remarkable achievement. The team recovered thousands of artifacts from the wreck, many of which were perfectly preserved in the anoxic conditions of the riverbed. The cargo included everything from tools and nails to fine china, clothing, and even bottled food. The discovery provided a unique window into life on the American frontier, offering insight into the everyday items that pioneers needed as they built new lives in the West. Chapter 4. A New Life for the Arabia. The recovered artifacts from the Arabia were eventually put on display at the Arabia Steamboat Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. The museum, which opened in 1991, has since become a popular destination for history enthusiasts and tourists alike. Visitors to the museum can see the preserved hull of the Arabia, as well as the thousands of items that were recovered from the wreck. The story of the Arabia is more than just a tale of a sunken steamboat. It is a testament to the spirit of adventure and the drive to explore the unknown that defined America in the 19th century. The steamboat played a crucial role in the expansion of the frontier, bringing people and goods to places that were otherwise inaccessible. Its sinking was a tragedy, but its rediscovery has allowed the Arabia to continue its journey, not through the waters of the Missouri River, but through the pages of history. Today, the legacy of the Arabia lives on, not just in the artifacts that fill the museum, but in the stories of those who sailed on her, the pioneers who depended on her, and the modern-day adventurers who brought her back to life. The Arabia reminds us of the ever-changing nature of history, and how even in loss, there can be discovery and renewal. Chapter 5. The spirit of exploration. The excavation and preservation of the Arabia were monumental undertakings, requiring not only physical labor but also a deep respect for history. The project was driven by a desire to connect with the past, to uncover a moment in time that had been frozen beneath the earth. The story of the Arabia serves as a reminder of the importance of preserving history, of remembering the lives and stories of those who came before us. The museum, with its vast collection of artifacts, offers more than just a glimpse into the past. It provides a tangible connection to the pioneers who braved the wilds of the American frontier. The carefully preserved goods, the boots, tools, dishes, and even perfume, tell the story of a people who were determined to carve out a new life in an unfamiliar land. They are reminders of the hardships and triumphs of the era, of the relentless push westward, and of the courage that defined a generation. The Arabia story continues to inspire those who seek to uncover the past. It is a tale of discovery, of perseverance, and of the enduring human spirit. The Arabia may have been lost to the river on that fateful day in 1856, but its legacy has been preserved for future generations to explore, study, and admire. As visitors walk through the museum, they are transported back to a time when the rivers were the lifeblood of the nation, when steamboats like the Arabia were the engines of progress. They can imagine the thrill of setting out on a journey into the unknown, the excitement of discovering new lands, and the determination to overcome whatever obstacles lay in their path. The Arabia story is not just a chapter in the history of steamboats, it is a chapter in the history of America itself. It is a story of exploration, of innovation, and of the enduring desire to push beyond the horizon in search of something new. And as long as there are those who are willing to dig deep, both literally and figuratively, the story of the Arabia will continue to inspire and captivate for generations to come.
The Steamboat Twilight Chapter 1. The steamboat era and the rise of the Twilight in the mid-19th century. The rivers of America were the arteries of a nation expanding westward, carrying the lifeblood of commerce, people, and progress. Steamboats, with their towering smokestacks and massive paddle wheels, were the technological marvels that powered this expansion. They traversed the vast networks of rivers that connected bustling cities, remote frontier outposts, and burgeoning settlements. Among the many steamboats that plied these waters, the Twilight was a vessel that embodied the spirit of its time. Launched in 1864, the Twilight was a sleek, sidewheel steamboat, built for both speed and elegance. Measuring 210 feet in length and with a beam of 36 feet, the Twilight was designed to navigate the often treacherous rivers of the Midwest, including the mighty Missouri River. The Twilight was commissioned by a group of ambitious investors in St. Louis, who saw the potential for profit in the booming post-Civil War economy. The vessel was intended to serve the thriving trade routes that connected the agricultural heartland of Missouri with the markets of St. Louis and beyond. With its shallow draft and powerful engines, the Twilight was capable of carrying heavy cargoes of grain, livestock, and manufactured goods, as well as passengers eager to explore the opportunities of the frontier. The Twilight quickly became a familiar sight on the Missouri River, its graceful silhouette cutting through the water as it made its way up and down the river. The steamboat was known for its reliability and speed, and it soon developed a reputation as one of the finest vessels on the river. Passengers aboard the Twilight enjoyed a level of comfort and luxury that was rare in the rough and tumble world of frontier travel. The main deck featured spacious cabins, a grand salon, and a dining room that offered fine meals and spectacular views of the passing landscape. Chapter 2. The Missouri River. A treacherous highway. The Missouri River, often called the Big Muddy, was a formidable and unpredictable force. Its waters were fast-moving, its currents were strong, and its channel was constantly shifting. Sandbars, snags, and submerged debris were hidden dangers that could rip through the hull of a steamboat and send it to the bottom in minutes. Navigating the Missouri required skill, experience, and no small amount of luck. The Twilight's captain, George Conway, was a seasoned riverboat man with years of experience navigating the Missouri River. He was respected by his crew and known for his steady hand and deep knowledge of the river's many hazards. Under Captain Conway's command, the Twilight had completed numerous successful voyages, delivering goods and passengers to towns and settlements along the river's winding course. But despite Captain Conway's experience and the Twilight's reputation, the Missouri River was a force that could never be fully tamed. The river was known for its sudden shifts and unpredictable changes, and even the most experienced crews could find themselves in peril. For the Twilight, the summer of 1865 would prove to be a fateful time, as the steamboat embarked on a journey that would end in disaster. Chapter 3. A fateful voyage. In late July 1865, the Twilight was docked in St. Louis, preparing for a routine trip upriver to deliver cargo to towns along the Missouri River. The vessel was loaded with a mix of goods, including barrels of flour, sacks of grain, crates of dry goods, and other essential supplies. The steamboat also carried a number of passengers, including farmers, merchants, and a few families traveling to the frontier. As the Twilight set off from St. Louis, the mood aboard the steamboat was one of optimism and anticipation. The Civil War had ended just a few months earlier, and the country was beginning to heal and rebuild. For many of the passengers and crew, the voyage was a symbol of new beginnings and the promise of prosperity in the post-war era. The journey upriver was uneventful at first, with the Twilight making steady progress against the current. The steamboat stopped at several towns along the way, unloading cargo and picking up new passengers. The weather was warm, and the river was calm, offering little hint of the dangers that lay ahead. As the Twilight approached the town of Rocheport, Missouri, the crew began to notice subtle changes in the river. The current seemed to be growing stronger, and the water level appeared to be dropping. The Missouri River was notorious for its shifting sandbars, and Captain Conway knew that this stretch of the river was particularly treacherous. He ordered the crew to slow the steamboat and take extra precautions as they navigated the winding channel. Despite these efforts, disaster struck in the early hours of August 8, 1865. As the Twilight rounded a bend in the river near Rocheport, it struck a submerged sandbar with a jarring impact. The steamboat shuddered as the sandbar tore into its hull, causing water to rush into the lower compartments. The crew and passengers were jolted awake by the collision, and panic quickly spread as the realization set in that the Twilight was in serious trouble. Captain Conway and his crew acted quickly, trying to assess the damage and save the steamboat. They attempted to reverse the engines and free the Twilight from the sandbar, but the vessel was stuck fast. Water continued to pour into the hull, and it soon became clear that the steamboat was sinking. The crew worked frantically to lower the lifeboats and evacuate the passengers, but in the chaos and darkness, the situation grew increasingly dire. Chapter 4. The sinking of the Twilight. As the Twilight began to list dangerously to one side, the crew and passengers scrambled to abandon ship. The lifeboats were quickly filled, and some passengers jumped into the river in a desperate attempt to swim to shore. The crew tried to maintain order, but the panic and confusion made it difficult to coordinate the evacuation. The steamboat's deck was soon awash with water, and the Twilight began to break apart as the river's current pulled it downstream. In the end, the Twilight sank quickly, disappearing beneath the murky waters of the Missouri River. The exact number of casualties remains uncertain, but it is believed that several passengers and crew members lost their lives in the disaster. Those who survived were left stranded on the riverbank, watching helplessly as the remnants of the steamboat were carried away by the current. The news of the Twilight's sinking spread rapidly, shocking the communities along the Missouri River. The loss of the steamboat was a tragic reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of the river. Chapter 5. Aftermath and Legacy. In the aftermath of the sinking, efforts were made to recover what could be salvaged from the wreck of the Twilight. Divers and salvage crews were sent to the site near Rocheport, but the strong currents and shifting sands made it difficult to locate and retrieve the sunken vessel. Some cargo was recovered, but much of the Twilight and its contents were lost to the river. The sinking of the Twilight was a somber event in the history of the Missouri River, but it was not an isolated incident. The river claimed many steamboats over the years, each disaster a testament to the power and unpredictability of the Big Muddy. Yet, despite the dangers, steamboats remained a vital part of the transportation network in the American Midwest, continuing to carry goods and passengers along the river's winding course. For those who remembered the Twilight, the steamboat became a symbol of the perils of river travel and the fragility of human endeavors in the face of nature's might. The disaster near Rocheport was a reminder that even the most advanced technology of the time could not fully conquer the forces of the natural world. The Bertrand was launched in 1864, during a period when riverboats played a crucial role in expanding the American frontier. Built in Wheeling, West Virginia, the Bertrand was a relatively new steamboat, custom-made for the tumultuous Missouri River. As part of the Montana and Idaho transportation line, its purpose was clear: to transport supplies, passengers, and cargo to the booming mining regions in the Northern Territories, primarily Montana, where gold fever was drawing thousands of prospectors eager to make their fortunes. The Missouri River was the most direct route to these remote territories, but it was also infamous for its treacherous conditions. Unpredictable snags, fluctuating water levels, and narrow passages demanded specialized vessels. The Bertrand was engineered with a shallow draft to navigate these tricky waters, making it agile and able to travel over shallow sections without grounding. Measuring 161 feet in length with a width of 32 feet, it had a powerful engine that allowed it to maneuver through the shifting currents. Its hull was reinforced to withstand minor collisions with submerged objects, a necessity for steamboats on the Missouri, where obstacles were often hidden beneath the river's murky waters. As the Bertrand embarked on its short but eventful career, it primarily worked in the commercial shipping of goods, outfitted to carry all the necessities for a mining boomtown, from mundane foodstuffs to high-value cargo like mining tools, clothing, spirits, and luxury items. Unlike most steamboats that prioritized passengers, the Bertrand was primarily a cargo vessel, with its holds filled with the goods that the isolated miners, merchants, and townspeople of the Montana Territory eagerly awaited. Although the journey to Montana Territory promised great profits, the path up the Missouri was a gauntlet of dangers. Sandbars could appear unexpectedly, shifting after every storm or seasonal flood, making navigation a constant challenge even for experienced pilots. Snags, tree trunks lodged firmly in the riverbed, were particularly perilous, as they could pierce a wooden hull with devastating results. But the allure of profits kept companies like the Montana and Idaho Transportation Line in business, and the Bertrand became part of a convoy of similar vessels braving the river to fuel the boom in the West. Before its fateful final voyage, the Bertrand had already encountered some challenges on the river, as was typical for Missouri River steamboats. In early journeys, the Bertrand successfully navigated various obstacles that would have stranded or wrecked lesser vessels. Its crew, led by the skilled Captain James Yore, grew adept at reading the river's shifting channels, relying on instincts honed by experience. The Bertrand was on one of its earliest and most ambitious runs when it left St. Louis in March 1865, loaded with nearly 300 tons of supplies valued at over $100,000, an enormous amount at the time. This cargo included everything from household essentials like canned goods and preserved foods to more unusual items such as glassware, jewelry, and even ice skates and bottled ale. There were tools and machinery for mining, clothing, and other provisions needed for those aiming to settle and establish businesses in the growing mining camps and towns. Part of the allure of steamboats like the Bertrand was that they could carry not only basic supplies but also luxury goods, helping create a semblance of civilized life amid the harsh conditions of the frontier. In essence, the Bertrand was a floating warehouse, a vital link between the well-stocked ports of St. Louis and the rugged outposts of Montana. Though river navigation had been a central part of American commerce for decades, the Missouri River was far more challenging than the relatively predictable Mississippi or Ohio. It was considered untamable by many riverboat crews, as the sediment-laden water, sandbars, and powerful currents required intense focus and skilled navigation. During the spring, when the Bertrand set off, the waters were especially treacherous due to melting snow and seasonal floods, which raised the river's level and hid many snags from sight. Despite its reinforced design and a skilled crew, the Bertrand was not immune to the Missouri's hazards. On April 1, 1865, disaster struck. Near DeSoto Bend, just north of Omaha, Nebraska, the steamboat struck a massive snag that tore through its hull. The damage was catastrophic, and water flooded in faster than the pumps could manage. Within minutes, the vessel was beyond saving, and Captain Yore had no choice but to abandon ship. The cargo, so carefully packed and secured, was lost to the depths of the Missouri. The sinking of the Bertrand was a major setback for the Montana and Idaho Transportation Line, as the loss of both the vessel and its valuable cargo dealt a financial blow to the company. The disappearance of such a large supply shipment also affected the miners and settlers in Montana Territory, whose access to essential supplies and luxuries was limited by the region's remoteness. With the Civil War ending and the demand for goods soaring, the Bertrand's demise represented more than just a financial loss. It also symbolized the precarious nature of life on the frontier, where the aspirations of both businesses and individuals could be dashed in an instant by the forces of nature. Though the Bertrand was soon forgotten by many, its story was far from over. In 1968, more than a century after the Bertrand sank beneath the Missouri River, the steamboat's story took an unexpected turn. What had long been a local legend and a footnote in the history of frontier commerce became a modern-day treasure hunt that would uncover one of the most extraordinary time capsules of American frontier life. The discovery of the Bertrand's wreckage, and the nearly pristine artifacts within, began with a pair of treasure hunters, Sam Corbino and Jesse Purcell, who were captivated by stories of the steamboat's fateful voyage and the possibility of valuable cargo still hidden beneath the river. Corbino and Purcell were not archaeologists, but they were keen students of Missouri River lore. For years, they had been researching accounts of steamboat wrecks and following local rumors that held that the Bertrand's cargo might be buried in the river's silt-laden waters, preserved by the mud and sheltered from the effects of time. Encouraged by these tales, the two men began a systematic search for the wreck's precise location, combing through old maps, shipping logs, and accounts from surviving crew members and passengers. Finally, they zeroed in on an area near DeSoto Bend in western Iowa, where the Bertrand was believed to have struck a snag and sunk. Finding the exact location of a riverboat submerged in muddy riverbanks was no small feat. Over the years, the Missouri River had shifted its course significantly, altering the landscape and burying the Bertrand even deeper under layers of silt and soil. But Corbino and Purcell were undeterred. After extensive research and several exploratory digs, they located what they believed to be the remains of the steamboat roughly 30 feet below ground, buried beneath layers of river sediment. With this discovery came a new set of challenges. Excavating a 19th-century steamboat buried under tons of earth required meticulous planning and significant financial resources. Corvino and Purcell soon realized that they would need professional help to conduct a proper excavation without damaging the fragile remains. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service stepped in to oversee the excavation, transforming what had started as a private treasure hunt into a full-scale archaeological dig. The excavation of the Bertrand was a painstaking process, but it quickly became apparent that Corvino and Purcell had found something remarkable. The steamboat's hull was remarkably well preserved, protected by the Missouri River's silt, which acted as a natural seal against the elements. Even more astonishing were the items found within the wreckage, an incredible array of goods that had been intended for the gold miners and settlers in the Montana Territory. Because the sinking occurred in spring, before the hot summer months that could accelerate spoilage, many items were shockingly well preserved, offering a glimpse into the world of mid-19th century frontier life. The cargo consisted of over 200,000 items, from the mundane to the exotic. There were essentials like canned fruits and vegetables, pickled goods, and preserved meats, all of which were still perfectly sealed. Scientists later discovered that some of these canned goods were still edible, an astonishing testament to 19th century preservation methods. There were also luxury items, including fine wines, champagne, and whiskey, imported cigars, and even clothing such as hats, boots, and fabric. Beyond these luxury items, the cargo also contained critical supplies for mining, from shovels and pickaxes to scales and other specialized equipment needed to work the gold mines. There were medicinal supplies like opium-based painkillers and patent medicines, as well as toiletries, buttons, sewing needles, and children's toys, indications that entire families were moving westward, hoping to establish themselves in the booming mining territories. This assortment of goods reflected the wide-ranging needs of a frontier society trying to recreate elements of civilized life amid the rugged, often hostile environment of the American West. The discovery of the Bertrand was hailed as an archaeological milestone. Unlike most excavations that unearth fragments of ancient civilizations, the Bertrand's artifacts offered a well-preserved snapshot of a specific moment in American history. This was a time when the nation was still recovering from the Civil War, and the westward expansion was seen as a symbol of renewal and opportunity. The cargo's diversity painted a vivid picture of frontier life, illustrating both the harsh realities and the comforts that people sought in such remote areas. After the excavation, the artifacts from the Bertrand were carefully preserved and catalogued, a process that took years due to the sheer volume and fragility of the items. Many of the goods were transferred to the DeSoto National Wildlife Refuge Visitor Center in Iowa, where they are now displayed as part of a permanent exhibit. The center showcases everything from preserved foods and bottles to clothing and mining tools, painting a vivid picture of the goods, ambitions, and daily life of those heading westward, allowing visitors to step back in time and gain a tangible connection to the era of steamboat commerce and frontier exploration. Today, the Bertrand stands as one of the best preserved examples of Civil War-era river commerce. The Bertrand's brief working history, culminating in its tragic end, is remembered as a powerful testament to the relentless push of American expansion and the unforgiving nature of the Missouri River.